Hey everybody, and welcome back. My name is Colin DeCheshin, President of Heads Up Plant Protectants. And in today's webinar, we're going to answer another frequently asked question by a grower who submitted this to us out of Iowa. Let's delve into it. Today's question comes to us from Will from Central Iowa, and Will is asking, how does Heads Up work on soybean sudden death syndrome? Now, if you farm in the north central region, such as Will, and you grow soybeans in your rotation, you know how serious of impact sudden death syndrome can have on your crop. Yield losses can be as high as 50%, and this is one of two emotionally devastating diseases that farmers unfortunately have to deal with, especially in ground that has high yield potential and usually where your best beans are growing. Let's dig into a little more about the disease, and then we'll talk about heads up for this disease and management strategies. So what is soybean sudden death syndrome? Soybean sudden death syndrome is a fungal pathogen caused by a strain of Fusarium, or the root rot complex, called Fusarium virguliforme. This pathogen overwinters from year to year and is very difficult to get rid of once it's infected in your soil. The fungal pathogen itself is a root rot fungus, and it attacks the root system of the plant early in the season, especially under wet and warm conditions. But then late in the season, what you're going to see is leaf symptoms of yellow, browning, and drooping leaves. Sometimes they cup or curl. And that's due to a toxin that the fungus exudates throughout and translocates throughout the plant's structure, and can be very limiting on the plant's ability to reach its maximum yield potential. SDS is a fungal disease that starts early in the season, but the unique part about this disease is that we don't see the symptoms in the canopy until late July or mid-August typically. When we start to see disease symptoms in the canopy, we'll see yellowing of the leaves and cupping of the leaves. And this is when the plant will shut down prematurely, no longer being able to photosynthesize and make energy to produce beans and fill its pods. The earlier the disease sets in and we see symptoms in the canopy, the more severe it is on yield loss. SDS prefers warm, wet soils in the spring, and the symptoms don't show for months, but it thrives in moist soils. So if you have a wet July and humidity that goes on through August, this is prime conditions for SDS to occur. Finally, when it comes to SDS, there is no rescue treatments. Once you see the disease in your canopy, it's too late, and there's no foliar products or solutions that you can do to rid your fields of SDS. So right now, growers rely on variety selection. There's no such thing as a fully resistant bean, but there are some good genetics out there that have some tolerance. And there are limited seed treatment options available, Heads Up Plant Protectant being one of them. When it comes to the foliar symptoms SDS that occur, here's what we see. It's cupping and yellowing between the leaves, and we see this necrosis or intervenal chlorosis between the leaves, which is on the right side of the screen. Usually this will start in just one to a few plants that you can see in a distance, but then it does seem to occur in pockets or in strips of the field, and especially in areas with high compaction is where you're going to see this disease first set in your field before it spreads. When it comes to the root system, Fusarium virguliforme, or SDS, does cause root damage. You can sometimes see a red discoloration at the root system, which looks like pustules just at the crown of the plant, and you will find often blue fungal growth, which is present on the lateral roots. So now that we know a little more about SDS, we've got to answer Will's question, what can Heads Up do for soybean SDS? Heads Up is a product that utilizes a unique mode of action as a seed treatment called systemic acquired resistance. Essentially, we're helping the plant to better utilize its genetics and acquire a higher level of resistance throughout the growing season. And this is done through gene expression. So we're turning on defense-related genes from day one, which lasts right until harvest. Heads Up as a product has shown to help reduce the incidence and severity of SDS, and doing so, Heads Up helps to slow down the infection from wiping out the plant or to slow down the symptomology of SDS. Finally, I'd like to note that Heads Up again is not a rescue treatment for SDS, but it will help to reduce yield loss from SDS by helping the plant stay alive longer, which in turn helps with better pod set and fuller beans in your pods. So now here's a field that the Iowa Soybean Association ran for a trial with Heads Up versus naked seed. What we have here is two different varieties of soybeans on the left and the right side of the screen. But then we have 8 rows, which was a split planter approach, and it was Heads Up on soybean seed that had some innate tolerance to SDS versus the same variety just planted with naked seed. In the picture, you can see some yellowing, which is natural maturity of the beans. That's what we want to see. But the dark brown patches are the infection due to SDS, and that's the premature death that we do not want to see correlated with this disease. As you can see, the first row was just Heads Up as a standalone product. The second row from the left being naked seed, and that pattern repeats over and over for the next 6 rows. What we're looking at here is a split planter approach to looking at Heads Up as a standalone seed treatment versus naked seed. The dark brown patches exhibit symptoms of SDS, which is what we don't want to see. And what I could tell you is the first row from your left is Heads Up treated seed. We don't see a lot of the dark brown patches. The second row is naked seed by itself, and we start to see the dark brown patches in that pass. The field was planted back and forth, Heads Up, no Heads Up, Heads Up, no Heads Up. And as we can see down to the row differences in the dark brown symptomology, it's quite striking that these rows showing SDS are all the untreated seed. This particular field, once we went to harvest, had a 3.9 bushel an acre yield advantage. Here's another study from the University of Minnesota. And what we're looking here at is disease incidence called DX, and it's at the R6 or reproductive growth stage. What we're looking at is untreated seed in the blue bars, commercial seed treatment only in the red bars, and Heads Up as a standalone product in the green bars. When we look at average incidence of disease, or DX at R6, this is a count of 100 plants and how many are showing symptomology of SDS in the canopy. In the untreated seeds, it was just about 28 plants or 27.8 plants were marked with some degree of SDS versus the Heads Up treated plants in the green bars. Out of 100 plants were only showing a 10% infection, or 10 out of 100 plants. So there was about a 17% reduction in infection when we look at a 100 plant count in these plots. At the same time, we look at defoliation with SDS, and we go from untreated, which had 27 plants were completely stripped of their leaves, versus 15% were defoliated with the Heads Up product. So Heads Up helped to keep the plant greener longer and keep those plants healthy with their leaves attached so they can keep photosynthesizing and producing energy to reproduce. Lastly, when we look at yield differences here, there is about a 7 bushel an acre difference that Heads Up helped to keep on the plant. So we went from 51 bushels with the heads up treatment versus the untreated seed, which yield out at 44 bushel an acre. So as a final thought, heads up is a great starting point if you have a history of SDS in your fields. You also have to consider variety selection. Heads up is active on the genetics, and if there is something within the genetics that relates to tolerance to SDS, heads up will help to make better utilization of that genetic ability. Look for the proper variety with your seedsman and then talk to him about heads up. Next, you'll want to consider the field history of SDS, and if that field has been plagued for SDS for several years, you might want to consider a longer crop rotation out of soybeans to help let that fungal pathogen subside. Lastly, there is a belief that there is some correlation between soybean cyst nematode, which is a feeding insect that feeds on the soybean's root structure, and sudden death syndrome. If you have high levels of soybean cyst nematode, you will want to consider putting an SCN product in with a product like Heads Up, as soybean cyst and SDS do believe to have some correlation to each other. Lastly, in severe cases, we have several customers who use Heads Up in combination with a fungicide seed treatment specific to sudden death syndrome. This is a great approach because you're getting two modes of action. The fungicide seed treatment's working to kill or inhibit the fungal pathogen from attacking the plant, and Heads Up is making better utilization of the genetics. So for the ultimate approach and a more robust seed treatment package, you can always consider putting a secondary mode of action with Heads Up, such as a fungicide seed treatment, specifically designed to go after SDS. With that, that's the presentation for today. If you have any questions on soybean sudden death syndrome, would like to know more about Heads Up, or would like to review our data package or ask some questions, give us a call at 1-866-368-9306 or visit us online at www.headsupst.com. Thank you.